Benim herkesi pilatese toplayışım. Kanki şey oluyor. Pazar gününden açılıyor workshop şeyleri uygulamada. Hı-hı. Oradan şey yapıyorsun. Aa çok iyi. I kind of ask everyone to be seated because we're gonna start in a minute. Dear guests, we now begin the panel session of our program. I would like to invite Professor Alev Erkilet to the stage to moderate the session. And now, please join me in welcoming our distinguished panelists to the stage. Firstly, Nurhayat Bekir. Dr. Amila Sıvraka Imamovic. Dr. Teslim Khirji. And lastly, Dr. Mustafa Çattık.
Okay, thank you very much. Our dear guests, welcome again. We are very, very proud of your being here with us in relation with a very important topic from the perspective of Muslims and at the same time from the perspective of Muslim women. I want to emphasize the second part because, as you know, during the 28th February period in Turkey, we experienced one of the basic discriminations towards women by putting forward the idea that, as Sümeyye Erdoğan hanımefendi said, Muslim women are using headscarf as symbols, or they are trying to impose their belief on others, etc. So the topic we are handling here now was our life experience once upon a time. Of course, at that time, we were struggle and we are trying to return back to our jobs. We are returning back to our universities. But at that time, we didn't handle the issue from an academic perspective. At that time, our problem was much more a humane problem, a struggle of getting back our jobs. But after 10 years or 15 years passed, I realized that there is a very interesting topic, gender and gender studies, through which we can handle all these kind of discriminations and political problems we have experienced. I don't want to talk too much. I want to give the floor to my dear guests. But when we are starting, I wanted to share my feeling, my experience with you, and wanted to emphasize the importance of academic studies on this subject also. Maybe now, honey, we don't have any political problem from this perspective, but all over the world, Muslim women are under the risk of discrimination in relation with their headscarves or in relation with their sex. We are not differentiating the two from each other. This is a gender discrimination towards women. So we must be equipped, well equipped in relation with these topics to equip ourselves to put forward basic theories, perspectives, research, studies, and of course, all the time, be ready to defend our rights and our students and daughters and sisters' rights. So the main topic was, human rights resistance is indispensable, is very important, but this resistance must also be supported with academic study, with theory, with research, with data and knowledge. Then, inshallah, human rights struggle will be much more powerful and be able to get the rights they are defending for. Thank you again for your being with us here. I want to give the speech to our first speaker, Assistant Professor Nurhayat Bekir. She's our colleague in law faculty and finishing her PhD thesis. Inshallah, she will be as quickly as possible, be one of our assistant professors. Nurhayat will talk about workings, woman freedom of religion and conscience, a critical perspective on the interpretation of the ECHR. Maybe we can open what ECHR is.
European Court of Human Rights.
Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. May I see my presentation on the screen, please? Is it possible? Okay. I hope it works. Okay, if...
Çalışıyor mu?
Oh, perfect.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Professor, again, and dear guest. Welcome you all. Greetings to all. My name is Nurhayat Bekir, and first of all, I would like to thank Ms. Uysal. For the first time in a long while, I witnessed a discussion predominantly led by women in a space where women were not just present in large numbers, but were also the main voices being heard. Today, I aim to critically examine the interpretation of the European Court of Human Rights with regard to the freedom of conscience and religion of working women. While European Court of Human Rights is an international court established to ensure that the member states of the Council of Europe comply with the European Convention on Human Rights, which is a treaty aimed at protecting fundamental rights and freedom. While individual applications to the ECHR, states parties to the convention can be lodged by any person, group, company, or NGO with complaints about violations of their rights. Well, as you see, freedom of thought, conscience, and religion is protected by Article 9 in the Convention. The scope of Article 9 is very wide, as it protects both religious and non-religious opinions and convictions. When we look at international conventions, it is generally seen that the freedom of religion and conscience, particularly the freedom to manifest one's religion or belief, is regulated as a right that can be restricted. This is also the case in the ECHR, while the freedom of conscience related to a person's inner sphere, forum internum, is protected. It is stipulated that the protection of the outward manifestation of religion, such as worship, teaching, practices, and rituals, can be limited. The court's case law regarding Article 9 is quite limited, actually, as the rights and freedoms provided by this article generally assessed within the scope of other rights and freedoms in the Convention. In claims of violations concerning the freedom of conscience and religion of working women, Article 9 and Article 14, prohibition of discrimination are often invoked together. Well, when it comes to the limiting of that right, prescribed by law concept is interpreted broadly, encompassing not only statutory laws, but also regulations, rules, and case law that establish legal precedents provided when they are clearly defined and accessible. So the legitimate purposes for restricting the freedom to manifest religion are necessary for the protection of public safety, public order, general health, or morals, or the rights and freedoms of others. Well, the third test applied by the court after the legality and legitimate purpose is necessity in a democratic society. So in this concept, as it mentioned before, the margin of appreciation is also applied in cases involving the proportionality or of interferences with the Article 9. In cases like Dahlab and Shahin, the court granted a broad margin of appreciation to states due to the lack of consensus among the Council of Europe member states. Well, in cases concerning freedom of conscience and religion in the workplace, the court has emphasized that activities carried out by an employee within the scope of their religion should not make it impossible for them to perform their job. Cases involving women have focused mostly on religious symbols and clothing. In this context, there are 9 cases related to the manifestation of religion and working women. Here, I will analyze the prominent ones with you. Well, the first case, Lucia Dahlab, a primary school teacher, converted to Islam after she started working and began wearing a headscarf. After a few years working like that, the school principal prohibited Dahlab from wearing the headscarf, and this ban was confirmed by the Swiss Federal Court. The court accepted that the headscarf as a powerful external symbol could be seen as a form of proselytism for children in this young age group. The court noted that wearing a headscarf as primary school teacher would constitute a potential interference with the religious beliefs of students and parents, and therefore the government had right to impose limitations on Dahlab's freedom to manifest her religion. So the interference was necessary in a democratic society. Well, the second case is against Turkey. Sevgi Kurtulmuş was a professor of economics at Istanbul University. and wearing a headscarf. She was subjected to a series of disciplinary penalties on the grounds that wearing a headscarf was in violation of the relevant law and regulations, and was subsequently forced to resign as a disciplinary sanction. The courts noted that a democratic state may be entitled to require public servants to be loyal to the constitutional principles like secularism on which it is founded. The court ruled that the choice of the extent and form such regulations must inevitably be left up to a point to the state concerned. Well, the court considers that the term practice in the Article 9 as employed does not cover each act which is motivated or influenced by a religion or a belief. So headscarf is also one of them, a motivated and or influenced action or belief. Well, okay. Another key case is about this woman from private sector, Nadia Ivaida. The story is British Airways switched from a high-necked blouse to an open-necked blouse with a cravat for women employees. According to the dress code, any religious accessory or clothing item should at all times be covered up by the uniform. Headscarves were allowed, by the way. If it could not be covered, permission was granted. Ivaida wore her cross openly and was sent home as a disciplinary sanction. Later, she was offered a job without a uniform and with no customer contact, but she rejected this offer. Following public reactions to the sanction imposed on Ivaida, the company reviewed its uniform policy and allowed the display of religious necklaces such as crosses. However, British Airways refused to compensate Ivaida for the earnings she lost during the period she was not at work. That after exhausting domestic remedies, Ivaida applied to the European Court of Human Rights. Nonetheless, the court has reached the conclusion in the present case that a fair balance was not struck. On one side of this case was Ms. Ivaida's desire to manifest her religious belief. On the other side, however, this case was the employer's wish to protect a certain corporate image. So the corporate's aim was legitimate. However, the domestic courts accorded it too much weight. Ms. Evaida's cross was discreet and cannot have detracted from her professional appearance, which was very good, by the way. So there was no evidence of any real encroachment on interest of others. The domestic authorities failed sufficiently to protect first applicant's right to manifest her religion in breach of the positive obligation under Article 9. So another application from the case of Ivaida, they were 4 people, was Shirley Chaplin, a geriatrics nurse. After the hospital changed uniforms to an open-necked design, they banned necklaces to reduce injury risks that accessories could pose because they are dealing with the old people. The court deemed the restriction legitimate in terms of general health. And the other ones, these are the whole cases, if you can see. I'm not going to give too much details, but the other cases include these. Lillian Ladell was a registrar who refused to conduct civil partnership ceremonies for same-sex couples due to her religious beliefs. And Catholic Astrid Siebenhaar was dismissed from her job at a Protestant-run nursery for being a member of a Catholic church, which violated her employment contract's requirement of loyalty to the Protestant church, and there was no violation at this case. A DD case involved a lawyer who was asked to remove her headscarf while attending a court hearing, but unfortunately we have no idea because that's also failure to exhaust domestic remedies, so there was no any case about it. And finally, I would like to analyze the case of Ebrahimian, and I will share my evaluations with you in conjunction with the case. Christian Ebrahimian, a social worker in a psychiatric department of French public hospital, had her contract not renewed due to wearing Islamic headscarf. At the time of her dismissal, there was no specific regulation regarding the ban on headscarves in public institutions. Only an earlier opinion from the Conseil d'État in 1989 concerning educational institutions. So the May 2000 opinion was referenced Only a few months before her contract non-renewal, a new decision from the Conseil d'État related to health institutions emerged. In this context, the legal framework's accessibility and foreseeability can be considered problematic because only 3 months before. So how can I know? In the Ebrahimian case, the legitimate aim of protecting the rights and freedoms of others was relied upon. So, by evaluating the dissenting opinions in the last case I reviewed, I would like to highlight and criticize some issues regarding the freedom of religion of working women in European Court of Human Rights. While previous cases referred to restrictions on public service in the education sector, like Dahlab or Kurtulmuş, the broad margin of appreciation in the limiting freedom of religion was extended to cover all public servants in the Ebrahimian judgment. So the decision is based on a dangerous assumption that public servants cannot express their religion's belief or even subtly without compromising the neutrality of the service they provide. So the government should have relied on a concrete aim, like she works at psychiatry departments, so patients may be affected or so. But instead, they used abstract principles to support a blanket ban for public servants, and court found this proportionate. Regardless of how broad the margin of appreciation granted to states may be, the legal framework relied upon should have been more accessible and foreseeable, which is also debatable in this case. And as I said, the court relied on the protection of others. In contrast, in Evida, the court found that too much weight was placed on the employer's interest in maintaining a corporate image without evidence of real harm. So the national courts gave more weight to secularism and state interest than to the applicant's interest, which did not pose a problem under the convention. The Evida case emphasized considering the possibility of changing jobs, positions when assessing proportionality, which was overlooked in this case. The headscarf was regarded as an ostentatious, powerful external symbol which contrasts with the court's tolerance for passive symbols like the crucifix in the state school classrooms in educational contexts like Lhotse case. I argue that powerful external symbols need to be reconsidered. As stated in the case law of the German Constitutional Court, the headscarf is no longer an extraordinary sight in Europe. It is now a common sight encountered in daily life. A teacher who does not engage in religious proselytism or advertising activities through their religion will influence a child to the same extent as any religious symbols they might encounter on the street. As stated in the dissenting opinion in Ebrahimian case, a principle of constitutional law or a constitutional tradition may easily end up by being deified, thereby undermining every value underpinning the convention. And this judgment, Ebrahimian judgment, comes dangerously close to doing exactly that. So I believe that after Ebrahimian decision, the court's approach increases the likelihood of intersecting discrimination due to the applicants being both women and subject to discrimination based on their religion, specifically in relation to treatment of Muslim women at the workplace and at public service due to their religion's clothing and symbols. Well, I would like to thank you for all your attention and for listening my presentation. And I appreciate the opportunity to share my insights with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nurhayat Hocam. And maybe at the end of the session we can discuss, but when I'm listening to you, I thought that there is a very interesting conflict in the discussion of the neutrality or neutrality of the public space.
Yes.
Çünkü on the other hand, there is another religion, there is another belief or ne bileyim secular understanding displayed there. But they are taking all religious symbols as problematic and violating this neutrality. Aslında probably from the law philosophy of law perspective, maybe, I don't know, we must put these discussions on the table and think together. Maybe at the end or now, if you want to say something, or at the end of the session, we can make a short summary, 1-2 words from each of you.
Maybe at the end, but I can only add that,
Please.
well, we need to check the
Please.
histories, because the Western history and the conflict between the ecclesiastical body and the political body. So that's why they created forum internum and forum externum divisions, which we don't have, obviously. So that's why we do not exclude the religious symbols to life, from life, because also another religions have had scars or different clothing preferences.
Of course.
I think that's the issue if you look at from the philosophical base. Maybe
Thank you. We can continue. Thank you very much. So we are continuing with Dr. Amila Imamovic. She's from Bosnia-Herzegovina. Welcome, our dear guest. And I think you will share with us your speech about freedom of religion or belief in the constitutional order of Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Especially in this context of wearing the hijab.
Please go on. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, esteemed rector and the dean of Ibn Khaldun University, Faculty of Law, esteemed president of Kadem and Turgev, Ms. Sumaya and Ms. Hatice, dear Professor Afra, dear professors and guests, Assalamu alaikum. It's a pleasure for me to be here today and discuss about this really important topic in this moment, especially for Muslim women in Bosnia and Herzegovina in this moment. Wearing the hijab is a religious obligation prescribed by Islamic law. It's not merely a religious or political symbol as portrayed by those who advocating for its ban. For Muslim women, wearing the hijab is a significant aspect of practicing, teaching, and the rules of their faith. This commitment is not conditioned by any specific public space, as the nature of Islamic law doesn't recognize the separation or division of the life of Muslims who practice their faith, or forum internum and forum externum. So this is a fact on which Islamic scholars have agreed both in the past and the present, and it is confirmed by Muslim experts across all parts of the world. From the other side, the Strasbourg bodies hesitated for a long time before they confirming that the wearing hijab is a religious symbol and that states must justify its restriction if they are to avoid violating of Article 9 of European Convention of Human Rights. So while Muslim women perceive the hijab as a religious symbol, as a religious obligation, most of Western societies, including the judiciary of Bosnia and Herzegovina, see it as a religious symbol. These views are groundless, as the nature of Islamic law doesn't recognize the separation or division of the life of Muslims who practice their faith. The most common used symbols associated with Islam are crescent and the star, which was the symbol of Ottoman Empire, and the Shahada, which is a symbol of Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The significance of Ottoman Empire, which was for the centuries the most powerful Muslim country, meant that both Muslims and non-Muslims began to acknowledge the symbol as Ottoman Empire as a symbol of Islam. So this is evidenced by many books from the 20th and 21st century that discuss the crescent and the star and the cross as opposing symbols. Although there is no doubt when it comes to the symbolism of the cross, the European Court of Human Rights applies double standards in its interpretation of Article 9, and in two cases, Lauzzi versus Italy and Aveida versus United Kingdom said, not only does the cross represent the principle and the value of democracy and Western civilization, that is also also a discreet way of expressing their faith. So the prohibition of visibly worn cross in a public space is the violation of Article 9 of freedom of religion or belief. It's also important to mention that at the end of 2023, European Court of Justice issued a ruling stating that public authorities had possibility to limit this issue or ability to restrict the wearing the hijab in a public workplace especially. It noted that such bans were permissible to establish a completely neutral administrative environment. So this decision highlights the trend of banning a hijab in workplace, especially in Europe. The issue of the hijab in public space depends largely on the adopted model of the relationship between the state and the religion and the state's approach to minority religions. So, for example, in France, Republic of France, the cradle of laicism, the hijab in public space is defined in an authoritarian manner. The issue of religious attire began very early in this country in the early 1990s due to intolerance amid immigrants, especially those from former French colonies. So statements from politicians and academics put pressure on legislative bodies and that led to the eventual prohibition of wearing the hijab in educational institutions, later in photographs in official documents, and finally niqab ban in public space in general. From the other side, United Kingdom has a state religion model, and very high, including a very high accommodation of religion minorities. So the country's cultural pluralism encourage ethnic minorities to practice their own traditions. Unlike the French assimilation model, the UK practices inclusive multiculturalism. So hijab is permitted in all public places, including police. So they have approved version for uniform. You can see on these photos, and in some other workplaces, for example, in military and etc. A third category is states where covering the hair is legally mandated. Kingdom of Saudi Arabia implemented certain reforms in recent years. So covering the hair is mandatory in two holy cities, in Mecca and Medina. In other, especially urban centers, we can see women without hijab but still wear modesty. From the other side, the Islamic Republic of Iran remains loyal to its policy of mandatory covering despite the protest across the country. So you can see on Western media that they instrumentalized this issue. But it's really important to say that the reforms Muslim women's runs deeply. It's not only limited on this issue. So more rights are required in the fields as marriage, family law, child custody, and etc. So, when we talk about the Bosnia and Herzegovina, between the two world wars in Bosnia, an intense debate emerged among the ulema and intellectuals regarding the obligation of the women to cover their faces. Then Reis Ulema of Islamic community, Mehmed Jamaluddin Čaušević, expressed his opinion that the Zar is not a strict Islamic obligation. So in that time, his views sparked sharp reactions. After the Second World War, and socialist revolution, Muslim women's clothing defined as an obstacle for their emancipation. So the campaign to abolish this attire started with Women's Anti-Fascist Front in 1947. This campaign wasn't successful, so in 1950s, a law was enacted prohibiting the wearing azar and fereja in public space. That is a traditional veils. I suppose that you know for Zared and Fereja from Ottoman period. So the practice of face covering in Bosnia and Herzegovina resurfaced after the 1990s. So under the pretext of addressing the Muslim question, the practices in European states, and security concerns, the parliamentary caucus of Alliance of Independent Social Democrats proposed the enactment of a law prohibiting the wearing of clothing that prevented identification. After a draft law wasn't adopted, the issue of niqab was no longer addressed in Bosnia. So the focus shifted to headscarf in public institutions, especially within the armed forces of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and later in High Judicial and Prosecutorial Council. The most famous case of hijab in Bosnia is the case of Emela Mujanovic. Unfortunately, Emela left the army in the September of the last year, but what's happened? After being admitted to the armed forces of Bosnia and Herzegovina, Emela went to Greece for military training. During her studies, she decided to wear the hijab, and she continued to wear her uniform to work with olive-colored headscarf, making it almost unnoticeable. You can see that on this photo. Despite this, Emela was prevented from performing her tasks according to her employment contract, and as a result, 2 lawsuits were initiated, first in 2012 and later in 2020. The first lawsuit dismissed because court stating that the plaintiff was returned to work and transferred in another barracks in Ustikolina, where she allowed to wear a hijab for certain period. But this transfer didn't resolve the issue of the hijab in the armed forces, so Mujanovic was reprimanded for violating regulations regarding to military uniform in 2019, and that was the reason for the second plaintiff. So in the second plaintiff, Mujanovic requested from the court of Bosnia and Herzegovina to rule that the Ministry of Defense violated her right to the freedom of religion or belief under the Article 9 of European Convention. Also, she said that she had been placed in an unequal position because of her gender, that is in relation with Article 14, because a male member of armed forces can express their religion by wearing beards. So what a court said? They said that the plaintiff claim was dismissed in its entire, and the court of Bosnia and Herzegovina referred to the case law of European Court of Human Rights, especially this case Dahlab versus Switzerland. In that context, they said that hijab could be interpreted as a tool of proselytism, but it's not okay to compare these two cases because Emela worked in environment with fully formed adult person. So the last, of course, the last instance is the court, constitutional court of Bosnia and Herzegovina. They made decision in this case, on July 11. That is a day of genocide in Srebrenica. And I think that they picked that date because, of everyone looked looked what's happened in Srebrenica and that in that day. So the Constitutional Court issued a ruling stating that the prohibition of displaying religious symbols in armed forces of Bosnia and Herzegovina didn't violate appellant's rights to manifest her religion. In light of case law of European Court of Human Rights, Constitutional Court said that this measure was unnecessary in democratic society and that appellant wasn't discriminated on any grounds. Only Judge Mirsad Cheman voted against this decision, and in his dissenting opinion, he said that this measure wasn't necessary in Bosnian society given its specific characteristics, especially because their undercap, which was already a part of uniform during the winter, of course, resembles a headscarf. And especially since neither the regular courts nor constitutional court proved how the wearing of hijab can infringe on the rights of others. Because Serbs and Croats, members of armed forces in Bosnia and Herzegovina, said that the headscarf in armed forces infringed their rights. So he said, due to the wrong premise they started from, they ultimately made the decision they did. And just a second, I will mention the second case in High Judicial and Prosecutorial Council. In 2006, when I was a student, they adopted a conclusion that prohibition, the wearing of religious symbols in judicial institutions, and this conclusion referred to legal provisions in this matter, that is a law on courts in the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which states judges and court officials are not permitted to display any religious, political, national, or other affiliation while performing their official duties. This is I can see here hypocrisy, because in Bosnia we have other factors that can suggest our affiliation, ethnic or religion, for example, our names or surnames. And I will finish with the site of Professor Silvio Ferrari. He's an Italian professor of religious law, and in his text, Religion in European Public Space, he said, and that will be my conclusion. The correct policy would ensure that wearing the headscarf is a matter of personal choice, not a requirement imposed by families or religious communities. But it should not go further than that. Once individual freedoms and the public interest are protected, there should be no restriction of wearing clothing that manifest an individual's religious and cultural beliefs in public spaces. Such practice would send the message that the system is tolerant, pluralistic, and respects everyone equally. Banning or excluding visible manifestation of faith in the workplace can be interpreted as the state promoting or favoring non-religious beliefs or excluding members of religious communities whose faith requires specific clothing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hocam. Thank you very much for this perfect presentation. And we are continuing with our dear Assistant Professor Tasnim Kirici Hoca. We are very happy to have her in our department, and we have the happiness of working together. And Hocam's topic is, she will give us details about the Tunisian case, hijab in the workplace in Tunisia after 2011, navigating pressures and secular norms. Hocam, the floor is yours.
Is it on?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to our esteemed guests. And thank you to the organizers for inviting me to this important panel. So as you will realize, I'm a sociologist. I'm not a legal expert. I will be, oh,
Hocanın sunumu herhalde. Sizin sunumunuz.
oh, so,
Hocam, they are looking.
okay.
You can start.
Okay, so as I said, I'm a sociologist, so I'm interested in people's experiences through these hurdles. I'm interested also in the historical roots of these discriminations and also the transformations, the social transformations that go with these discriminations. So I will address the freedom of religious expression for women in the workplace, specifically the right to wear hijab in Tunisia, my country of birth. Tunisia is, as you might know, known for being a progressive country in terms of women's rights. It's usually celebrated as quite forward in terms of granting women liberation. So this is very tightly linked to the modern state and to the, the project of modernity in Tunisia. So while it's actually celebrated as a country, Tunisia, as a pioneer in women's rights and progressive secularism, if we look closer, we find that there is discrimination, real discrimination against women who choose to wear hijab, and this continues to this day. This discrimination exists across many spaces, many social spaces, whether in the workplace, in public spaces, or even in the cultural discourse. This indicates that we're not facing here isolated incidents. Even here in Turkey, I usually hear that, discrimination are only isolated facts. It's not systemic. Women have been granted their rights, so we should not, focus so much on these stories. But what I'm about to show today is that far from being isolated incidents, it's actually about a systemic issue shaped by history, state policy and legislation, as well as dominant cultural norms. Am I using it the right way? Yeah. So let's begin with the historical context. So after Tunisian independence, President Habib Bourguiba, we see here in these two pictures, defined modernity as deeply intertwined with the liberation of women. He inaugurated this project symbolically in 1957 by personally removing the headscarf of the women of a local notable in, publicly. Also, he used to like taking pictures with, long lines of women who want to say hello, but none of them, as you see, is, accepted as possibly wearing hijab. So this has transformed in 1981 in a clear decree, the very infamous Decree 108, banning the hijab in public institutions as sectarian garment incompatible with progress. Sectarian, as if women belong to a small sect or a small group that separates and isolates itself from the rest of society. This continued under President Ben Ali. These policies were intensified. I personally experienced them as a student, a 15-year-old. I had to take off my hijab to enter my school. Women, girls, students were forced to sign internal regulations, condemning hijab. Those who resisted faced expulsion, humiliation, and in some cases, arrest. And here we see the picture of a woman without her veil in prison. And this one was of the things in which we were so equal before the law with men. Those who expressed their personal choices, who wanted to exercise their freedoms, they were in prison for many years. I have many testimonies from them. So one of the harrowing stories, actually, of this suffering is Bahija, a teenage girl arrested at only 16 for wearing the hijab, making her Tunisia's youngest political prisoner. in the 90s. So this legacy of controlling women's bodies sets the stage for many of the discriminatory practices we continue to see today. Of course, you know that we've been, since 2018, Tunisia has gone through a process of democratization. This has allowed us as a society to talk about the past, to tackle the past and the horrors we have seen. So the legal ban on hijab was lifted, and Tunisian women reclaimed their right to choose their attire based on their personal beliefs. However, to actually make the story short, discrimination persisted, particularly in professional settings. For instance, a 2021 survey indicated that 37% of women wearing visible religious symbols, as they call them in the secular discourse, or hijab, reported discrimination in job applications. Consider, for example, here, there are so many case studies about this, and these are very easily accessible through the media. The case of Tawaf Khlifi, for example, who applied to Odo BHF. Here I have a screenshot of her application. And she received a short reply: sorry, Odo does not accept veiled women. So although the company later attempted to explain that this was a HR mistake, the incident clearly reflects deeply rooted biases. Another case study at Tunisair, which is the state-owned national airline, a flight attendant was dismissed in 2017 for wearing her hijab, with the absurd justification formulated by the Minister of Transport that hijab reduces hearing by 30%. Can you imagine that? A comment that sparked widespread ridicule. The woman was never reinstated in her job, however. Testimonies from professionals also like Amira, a 29-year-old engineer, and Amal, a marketing graduate, showed that they were advised to change their style to fit a corporate image. So this reinforces that the idea that the discrimination is not an isolated occurrence, but part of a broader systemic issue. Also, if we look at sectors, so different sectors reinforce at different degrees and in different ways this bias. So in the public sector, the public sector often reinforces stricter informal expectations. So if you are in bureaucracy, if you are in the ministries, how you look, how you dress, the issue of hijab becomes very important. And it is not so allied. I met many very talented women in ministries who needed, if they wanted their professional promotion, they needed to take off their hijab. So many of them, there's a real trend of women taking off their hijab, not because they're not convinced that they need to wear it, but because that actually stands between them and their career. In the hospitality and media sector, in an effort to project a modern image systematically, hijabi women are excluded. And even when hiring occurs, promotion ceilings persist because visible religiosity is seen as controversial. What is preventing that woman from accessing her real credentials is that because her status is controversial. You think she's plotting against the state, you would think she's engaging in corruption, but no, it's just because she has hijab. And it's also considered as incompatible with leadership roles. So these practices impose a heavy psychological toll on women, forcing many of them into self-censorship or dual identities in professional versus personal spaces. So they would take off their hijab or transform it in many ways in the workplace, while they will adopt it in the personal spaces. And as I said, this has led many women to take off their hijab. So this discrimination experienced in workplaces extends actually even in public spaces. So in many hotels, for example, hijabi women, here I have examples of two clear, images that show that women are banned, they're barred from swimming pools because of hygiene pretenses. Lawyer Sana Haddad confirms that such bans are often based on loose interpretation of public health regulations. This is even more complicated, but here I chose, and not to make the presentation dull, I chose these pictures because these pictures, I don't need to anonymize them. These people are actually, supporting these claims in the public space, in the public discourse. So, for example, the artist Mohammed Kuka has called the hijab a denial of womanhood. Politician Tahar ibn Hassin infamously dubbed it the cloth of the donkey. And in sports, Olympic champion Habiba Ghribi, she's very well known across the world, she publicly demanded that a young hijabi runner choose between the hijab and running. So these instances send a clear message that hijabi women are not welcomed in many corners of public life. So this means that while Tunisia's 2014 constitution guaranteed freedom of conscience and belief, in practice, we lacked specific legal provisions such as anti-discrimination laws that protect women from being penalized for their appearance in the workplace or in public life. Discrimination based on religious appearance or attire is too often dismissed as isolated instances or incidents rather than recognized as a systemic problem. So, of course, as a sociologist, I cannot miss the point that this is actually there's a real intersectionality in this issue. This issue is complicated by many other sociological dimensions, such as class, age, and social status. So, for example, middle and upper class urban women often face stricter expectations as their access to prestigious employment requires conforming to a narrow secular norm. Also, as I mentioned earlier, if you are in ministries, if you are in the parliament, for example, the vice chair of parliament was a hijabi woman right after the revolution. Many, some ministers were hijabi. These were the object of, mocking in the official media. So it was actually very hard for you to be a hijabi woman at a high level, an official level in Tunisia, since 2018. So in contrast, working class women may experience different pressures with very low paid jobs, exploitation, no social rights or protection in precarious jobs in the informal economy. But I can say also that both groups share the exclusion as a common experience. Here I am mentioning the reaction of associations. So resistance has been growing. So since we've been living, in a democratic, environment, at least between 2011 and 2021, many associations, came forward to defend women's rights and bring in their own experiences, such as, for example, Tunsiyat, which means Tunisian women, or Aswat Nisa, women voices, or also many other small local women organizations. They sprang up all over the country. However, we still can notice a notable tension between the mainstream feminist movements that have not embraced the cause of hijabi women in the workplace or elsewhere, viewing the hijab only through the lens of religious conservatism. Bridging this divide, I believe, is essential for building a true defense for women's rights and freedoms. I think it's important also, as I said, as a sociologist, and history is important. But in this history, more specifically, it's actually the colonial legacies that matter. So I heard many cases, legal cases against France, and we have had the, we have been colonized by France to our, despair and to, our misery. And we continue to live under this legacy today. And I can, when I study the, women organizations from before, independence, we can find the same duality and tension between organizations that believe that modernization does not need to happen, against religious identity, against Muslim identity, and the association that believed that secularization was necessary. So the same duality can be found from before independence. Also, we can find campaigns. The French campaigns forced women to remove their veils under the guise of modernization. So there you find many, publicities that say, you are beautiful. Why are you hiding your beauty? You need to do. So actually we find echoes of this, of course, in France until today. But I wanted to highlight that this legacy continues to be present in the political sphere and cultural sphere, especially amongst secular state representatives and elites. So from Bourguiba to contemporary secular politicians, they all have defined women's rights by imposing a harshly exclusionist vision of liberation, which is often male-dominated, by the way, and without truly engaging with women's lived experiences. So if we look into these experiences, what do they tell us? So in contrast with this exclusionist discourse, the real experiences of veiled women can be illustrated by multiple testimonies of many of them, such as this one, where a young journalist writes, wearing the hijab for 14 years might have restricted me academically and socially, but it freed my mind and made me who I am today. Another activist, Safa Belrif, says maybe it's time for people to realize that not all of us need saving from the hijab. What we demand is respect, equality, and justice. So the struggle is indeed more than just about a piece of fabric. It's about autonomy, identity, and what genuine freedom and liberation really mean. So before I move to my recommendations and conclusions, I would like to highlight this important context where, this broader political environment that has complicated the question of women's rights and freedoms. So as you know, since 2021, Tunisia has in fact experienced significant democratic backsliding. So the 2014 constitution has guaranteed strong protections from women's rights, but especially through Article 46, but this constitution has been cancelled in 2021 by the president, who has imposed in 2022 his own constitution. And when I say his own constitution, it's not a constitution he has written with anyone, with any democratic bodies. It's a constitution he brought us from his pocket. He has written it himself. So in this constitution of 2022 avoids direct commitments to gender equality, significantly weakens checks and balances as expected, and centralizes all powers in his hands. So of course this has consequences, negative consequences for women's freedoms and their capacity to advocate for their rights. First of all, we lost the legal guarantees we had. That's an important loss. So without constitutional backing, rights become vulnerable to political manipulation. Also, one of the consequences of this democratic backsliding is the shrinking of civic space. So women's rights organizations, they were divided in the past, now they are united in the incapacity to actually really defend women's rights in an impactful way. So they face increasing pressure and reduced capacity to actually communicate with decision makers. In this context, of course, there's a selective use of women's rights. I don't know if you're following the news in Tunisia, but we have seen in these past 5 years 2 first prime ministers who are females. Did this mean that we had more women's rights, or did these ministers, protect women's rights? Not at all. They stayed silent on the loss of all the prerogatives, democracy gave women to actually advocate for their rights. this legal ambiguity and arbitrariness also can be expressed through the lack of independent judiciary. So the existing protections, if there are any, are overlooked and ignored. And this discrimination, any discrimination, goes unpunished. The result is that some independent media is starting to talk how discrimination against veiled women is thriving today in Tunisia, which is supposed to be the nation of freedoms. So in short, the context of democracy backsliding does not only weaken institutions, it restricts everyday freedoms and shatters democratic culture, where rights and freedoms can be defended and guaranteed. In this context, the struggle for women's rights and the right for choosing one's attire based on religious belief and the right to work become inseparable from the broader fight for democracy in Tunisia. So before I conclude, I would like to emphasize that addressing the challenges to freedom of religion and the right to work require not only awareness and grassroots action, but also concrete legal reforms and the right political environment guaranteeing rights and freedoms. Of course, as the issue of the return of democracy is too big and too colossal to be discussed here, I would focus on the direct concrete reforms and measures that are needed to better protect the freedom of religion and work for women in Tunisia. Say if Tunisia gets rid of dictatorship as Syria did, we have the right to imagine a better future. So if this happens, one of the first things I would advocate for is for explicit legal guarantees. Laws should clearly prohibit discrimination based on appearance or religious dress in hiring, in promotion, in access to public services. Such measures would set a clear legal standard for equality. We also need enforcement mechanisms. It's not enough to have laws on paper. There must be robust, independent oversight bodies empowered to investigate complaints and impose sanctions on employers and institutions that discriminate. Thirdly, I believe also we need to tackle discrimination, but by working on attitudes. And this works through working on awareness through training programs. So both the public and private sectors require training initiatives to dismantle stereotypes and challenge unconscious bias. We also need support structures by establishing channels for legal, psychological, and financial support for women who experience discrimination, ensuring they can assert their rights without prohibitive costs. So these legal protections are crucial because they defend individual dignity and economic freedom, ensuring that no woman must choose between her professional aspirations and her personal beliefs. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, Tasnim Hocam. Thank you very much for this perfect presentation. And our last speaker today will be Assistant Professor Mustafa Çattık. And his topic is the fighting for belief and work, legal struggles over women's religious freedom in Turkey's secular system. Please, Hocam, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. Today, I will going to talk about fighting for belief and work in the concept of Turkey. And my heading is fighting for belief and work, legal struggles over women's religious freedom in Turkey's secular system. At the beginning, I chose this heading, but when I prepare my presentation, I think that main thing in here is a secularism. And mainly, I will focus secularism in my presentation. Additionally, I am a constitutional lawyer, and in one view, constitutional law is a law of politics. For this reason, this presentation includes some aspects from political science as well. And shortly, this issue is a complex one. For this reason, we need to look at from different perspectives to this issue. Firstly, about freedom of religion, we can start with Legal and Human Rights Foundation. And in here, we have two main articles, Article 24 and Article 49 in our Constitution. In freedom of religion, we mainly have Article 24. And it clearly states that everyone has the freedom of conscience, religious belief, and conviction. Acts of worship, religious rites, and ceremonies shall be conducted freely as long as they don't violate the provisions of Article 14. In here, it clearly includes freedom to manifest your religion, freedom to practice your religion and appearance as well. And there may be some limitations, but these limitations must be lawful, necessary, and proportionate in a democratic society, according to Article 13 in our Constitution. But there is a main problem in this section, in this article, in Article 24. It says that they don't violate the provisions of Article 14. This saying in here, these wordings in here, clearly opposite of main understandings of constitutionalism. In constitutionalism ideas, constitutions should protect human rights and freedoms and should limit government. These are two main goals of any kind of constitution. But in here, we clearly see that Article 14 is a problematic one. When we look at Article 14 in our Constitution, firstly, it has a vague meaning. You can use whenever you want this article to limit any kind of right. And also, its readings is a problematic. It clearly talks about prohibition of abuse of fundamental rights and freedoms. This is not an understanding of human being perspective. In fact, of course, in some cases you may limit fundamental rights, but we already have an article for that, Article 13. For this reason, I think this Article 14 should remove it from our Constitution totally. And this is another one, right to work in our Constitution. It is mainly regulated in Article 49, and it clearly says that everyone has the right and duty to work. But in here, we can clearly see any kind of discrimination or any kind of anything related to equality. For discrimination or non-discrimination principle shortly, we have to look at another article in our Constitution, Article 10. It is clearly stated that everyone is equal before the law without distinction as to belief, religion, and sect, or any such ground. For this reason, we may say that right to work includes access to employment without any kind of discrimination based on religion or belief. And for this reason, shortly, restrictions based on religious appearance may violate this right as well. Now, I want to talk about historical rules. This will be maybe a lengthy part, historical rules. At the beginning, I want to make a summary, but after that, I will talk some details in here. Firstly, we may start with democratization and institutional secularism. It is not included in here, but as you have already know, our westernization and secularization process started in Ottoman period, with the Tanzimat Edict and Islah Edict, basically. And after that, we had Kanun Esasi. Before that, we had a total most total application of Islamic law. But with this Tanzimat era, starting with Tanzimat era, secularism affected our country and our understanding, our worldview as well, and also generally intellectual people affected from this kind of understanding. And by the transition to republic, at the beginning, our independence war was a kind of collective movement, and it was a kind of inclusive one. But by the time, after the establishment of republic, many things change, and Westernist, nationalist, and secularist ideas gain the power in our country. And Even in the even in its original context, in our constitution, 1924 constitution, it was clearly stated that religion of state is Islam. But 1937, it changed, and secular. Before that, this article revoked, and after that, in 1937, secularism added in our constitution. And but until 1940s, maybe middle of the 1940s, there was a strong secularism policies, strict secularism policies and modernization policies in Turkey. But by the starting of 1940s and 1950s, we may say that there was a gradual reintroduction of religious education and normative schools open, and also after 1950s, there were some changes about much more tolerate. But this was mainly caused from main change in the world. After World War II, we changed our system to the multi-party system, more democratic system. For this reason, these democratic movements directly affected our culture, our system within our country as well. 1961 constitution generally accepted as a good kind of example of constitution in our constitutional scholars, but we may criticize it in some aspects. Even it introduced stronger rights protections. Secularism reaffirmed in this constitution. In its text, there is no problem, but in application, we can say that problems started about women's rights and secularism. In 1970s, we see that pious Muslims or Islamists gained ground thanks to Milli Selamet Party, National Salvation Party. It entered parliament. In 1980, we have seen military coup, military intervention, and with this military coup, secularism reasserted as tension rises in universities. It mainly started in 1980. In Tunisia, example, as I remember, there was one historical example in 1981, and we may think that in the world there is a shift from more authoritarian tendencies for that time maybe. In 1980s and 1990s, escort bans expand under military-backed secularism. In here, we see the two different periods, Islamic movements and state resistance. In Özal era, Turgut Özal clearly support much more liberal policies in here. And he was the first, he tries to he tries to lift ban in here. And he after that, after Özal era, I will talk about it detailed. After Özal era, we have 28 February process, and in this process, military-led campaign against Islamic movements, escort bans strictly enforced, and religious schools, especially imamative schools, restrict. And also in this process, we see repeated party closure case for moderate, conservative parties or parties comes from Islamic movements like Welfare Party, like AK Party, etc. And in 2000, Islamic movements rise with AK Party and secular judicial pushback in this period, especially in 2008. In 2010, we see escort gradually legalized, and today, shortly, escort normalized legally, but cultural institutional resistance persists, and we have other problems in here. But before that, I want to just give this example as an information. First escort protest at universities in our history in 1967, led by Hatice Babacan, and this is a newspaper from that time. With Özal era. Özal was a kind of visionary politician, and he had a liberal understanding and much more liberated understanding. And also, he promoted a moderate Islamic identity, and he changed to attempted to change this escort ban in universities. But in that time, Constitutional Court struck down escort allowance as unconstitutional, citing secularism. What was that regulation made by Turgut Özal? It clearly accepted had wearing headscarves in universities, it clearly says that it is permitted to cover the neck and hair with a veil or turban due to the religious belief. This example is important. Why? Because when we look at this example and when we look at today, there is not a clear changes in our constitution. In these two examples, we have the same principles, secularism, but our understanding of secularism mainly changed. And this area, this case also example of beginning of modern judicial resistance to executive-led religious accommodation. After that, we faced with 28 February process and military intervention in civil identity. It was known as postmodern COP, and it resulted in widespread headscarf bans, Imam Hatip schools restrict, and also government leading party in that time, leaders of also leader was Erbakan, forced to resign, and this party banned by constitutional court, and it was the first thing, first one in our history, leader party, first party in the country directly banned by constitutional court in that time. And this process, of course, deepened integration of secularism and normalized exclusionary policies. And after that, in this period, we have a specific case, Merve Kavakçı. She elected as a member of parliament, but blocked from parliament due to her headscarf, her citizenship revoked, and she portrayed a threat to secularism, and this was the symbol of integrationist rigidity in late 1990s. And these are some pictures from that time. And lastly, Erdogan era, legal reforms and judicial conflict. I think maybe most strong step taken by Erdogan in that this time was in 2008. In that time, government or parliament clearly make an amendment in constitution, and for equality principle for our Article 10, they added that bolded one. State organs and administrative authorities are obliged to act in accordance with the principle of equality before the law in all directions and in the utilization of all kinds of public services. Additionally, in Article 42, they added, no one shall be deprived of the right to higher education for any reason, not expressly provided for in the law. The limits of the exercise of this right shall be determined by law. I think this was a good step. And Constitutional Court made one of the worst decisions in history, according to this case, about this case. Why? Because Constitutional Court, it is a kind of legal argument in here, but Constitutional Court only had a procedural review in here. It only can make a procedural review, but it make a substance review in here and annuled this article. If Constitutional Court comply with Constitution, our Constitution, and made only a procedural review in that time, that court couldn't annul, couldn't cancel this article. It was a clear thing, and this was one of the worst decision taken by the Constitutional Court, as I think. And pre-2000, about the working environment, especially pre-2013, women wearing headscarves were banned from becoming teachers, judges, police officers, or any kind of civil officials, and this ban extended to almost all public offices. And this justified through Article 2, secular state, and Article 24, freedom of religion with limitations, and especially with Article 14 of the Constitution. But civil services reform done by executive decree in 2013. Before that, as I remember, it was about 2010. Governmental decree and institutional practice began allowing headscarves in universities for education. After that, no constitutional change happened, but practically ban lifted through executive and administrative decision. In October 2013, a major reform package by the AK Party lifted the headscarf ban in most civil service positions, but not all of them, especially military, judicial body, and police were not included in this reform. But this was done through a Council of Ministers regulations, not constitutional amendment. I think this is one of the main problems in here in today. I will talk about it later. And after some time, military, judiciary, and police added in this process, especially in 2016 and 2017. We may call it as full normalization. In 2016 in police, in 2017 in military, this ban lifted. And today, headscarf women could now work as judges, prosecutors, soldiers, and police officers. But how we can see this reform process? I think it's a kind of process of reform without guarantee. Why? Firstly, these changes were not constitutional. These changes mainly done by some executive decisions and sometimes some legal changes by ordinary laws. But for this reason, it clearly remains vulnerable to political shifts in our country. And future governments could reverse these reforms without so much legal difficulty. Of course, today there is not this kind of environment even in opposition parties. It's a fact. Maybe we achieved to reach a kind of consensus in here, maybe, but there is an open gate still. True religious freedom in public life requires especially constitutional entrenchment, not only some executive tolerance or some ordinary legal text. And sorry about time. It looks like longer than I guess at the beginning. Okay, thank you. I want to talk about Turkish secularism in context. In Article 2, as I said before, it defines Turkey as a secular republic. Article 24 guarantees religious freedoms but limits expression of this religious freedom. And generally, in our country, state defines boundaries of permissible religion in public space. In here, I want to talk about another thing, models of secularism. These are different examples of models of secularism, but I think we may talk mainly two main kind of secularism. First one is a kind of strict secularism, or oppressive secularism. In here, it is extractive secularism in France. In this example, state actively excludes religion from public institutions to preserve neutrality. Religious symbols are restricted, especially in schools and bureaucracy. And second example is a maybe secularism with tolerance or multicultural understanding of secularism. These three different examples, I think, within this second category. In Germany, these are just different aspects of that. In Germany, we see cooperative nationality, state recognized and cooperates with religious institutions and offer selective accommodation. In United Kingdom, we see multicultural liberalism. It encourages public religious expression and supports pluralism. In the USA, I think, which is a kind of a good example, separationist, pluralist secularism. There's a strict separation of church and state. In Turkey, also, we don't have that. Why? Because we have religion of Directorate of Religious Affairs in Turkey, and it is directly governed by the state. This is against secularism also. There is a strict separation of church and state in the USA, but strong protection of public religious expression. But in Turkey, unfortunately, maybe this is caused from our intellectuals mostly affected by French intellectuals, French understanding. We apply French understanding, assertive secularism, and we make many bans. In here, I want to talk about another aspect. It is a divided society. What does a divided society mean? A divided society is one that cannot produce fundamental decisions by consensus in a free environment where equal actors play a role. Why I talk about divided society in here? Because I think that Turkey is a clear example of divided society. Why? Because there is a deep religious, ideological, and ethnic cleavages in our country. These may not cause problem if we succeeded to reach our fundamental decision in this environment. In a free environment with equal actors and with a good kind of consensus. But we have a deep-rooted disagreement over foundational political choices. Therefore, Turkey is a divided society. And about the divided society, there is another aspect, integration versus accommodation aspect. And this aspects directly reflects some of our controversial, some of our discussions in our country. Integration aspect start that there is a distinction between public sphere and private sphere, and integrationists generally claims that there shouldn't be any differences within a public sphere. They generally support this idea, and this is a kind of French understanding of secularism, in fact. But accommodation understanding says that there should be a continuation of public and private cultural differences. That these are not problems, and this support a much more liberal understanding of secularism. I think it is much more better for us. And if you may remember, even our President of the Republic, as I remember, Caesar, in this story, talk about common public sphere. In public sphere, in public area, there shouldn't be a headscarf, he claimed. And this rooted in this distinction, integration versus accommodation understanding in divided societies. And integration promotes homogenization, accommodation, institutionalized difference. And I think in a country like Turkey, where diversity is high, it is difficult for the integration approach to succeed. It is clear that the integration approach is also controversial in the context of human rights. This is another aspect. And integration in practice, the Turkish escarpment. It's a clear example of integrationist policies. And universities, public sector, and parliament excluded escort women. And integration in this concept, according to integration understanding, visibility of escort seen as a clear threat to secular order. And religious identity was provided. They say that, okay, you can use escort, but in your private life, not in public life. I think this is clearly contrary to the understanding of human rights. I clearly against this understanding. And this understanding not welcomed publicly in kind of religious symbols. And in Turkey, we can say, starting from 1980s, three different paces. Firstly, integration starting from 1980s to 2000s, escarpments, judiciary opposed secular uniformity. After that, starting from 2008, legal reversal and gradual policy changes allow escarp in public service and judiciary. For today, we may say that there is a selective accommodation, uneven application, reforms without strong constitutional backing. There is a main problem of us here is there is not a strong constitutional context, constitutional article. If we revisit current challenge, as I said before, laws change, some of laws change. Even today, we have some institutional culture about this problem. Institutional culture still exists. Still in universities, I face with this kind of problems about ESCA. Some students may face these problems from their professors, even in university in today. And in here, our main problem, as I said before, no constitutional guarantee of religious identity, and there is a clear informal exclusion process, especially in some kind of white-collar shop. There is a clear exclusion process. It is still process in hiring, in media, in other examples. And sorry. Another aspect in here, so many dimensions and aspects, but this is a kind of a complex topic. there is a change in state-citizen relations in Turkey happen. What does it mean? In the USA, they called their political elites or state elites as WASP. It means white, Anglo-Saxon and Protestant. When we look at Turkey, the founding elites of our republic was Turkish, Sunni, and secular or non-religious people. But with the 21st century, thanks to Özal, Erbakan, Menderes, starting from Menderes and Erdogan, it's a clear thing. With the 21st century, it can be said that religious Muslims in Turkey have also become involved in the system to a large extent. Today, it is clear that the state-citizen relationship in Turkey has expanded to include religious Muslims in general, but maybe some strict secularists may feel like excluded, but I don't think they are clearly excluded from our system. Another thing in here, toward inclusive secularism, I think we have to protect belief and non-belief equally. We have to recognize difference without privatizing it. We should decline integrationist approach. And there should be constitutional guarantees. Sometimes we see news say that there will be a new constitutional package as well. If there will be a new constitutional package, I think it clearly added, it should be added about some constitutional guarantee to our legal text. And we should understand secularism to protect difference, not suppress it. And this is the end of my presentation. Thank you for again.
Hocam, thank you very much. I only wanted to make a very small contribution about, you used a sentence about Turkey, hard to integrate. What was the specific concept?
Integrationist or accommodation.
Yes, I just wanted to share one of my experiences in the period 2010-2012. It was the period we were making the new constitution discussions in Turkey. And I saw that we were also part of a platform, the new constitution platform. There were different academicians, professors, writers, journalists, etc. And we tried to do something like that, not propose constitution articles, but go to people and ask them what they want, which kind of new constitution they are demanding. We tried to do it. We made kahvehane meetings, talk to people there, and big salon meetings, and tens of thousands of people came. And in the final analysis, we produced a small booklet about the people's demands from the new constitution. And the most important issue affected me was that everyone we interviewed with was talking about other people's rights, not only their rights. Not, I am a woman with headscarf. I was not talking about my headscarf rights, but for example, the Alevi people's religious practices, freedom. If they are talking about with Turkish people, they were talking about Kurdish people's rights. Yani, why I told it? I still believe that we can talk to each other. We are open to listen to each other. Yani, we are not so divided, according to my experiment, in making a new constitution. We are not at that point now. Of course, I accept.
I think constitutional making process done much more in an open environment, and I saw this kind of process with Akil İnsanlar Heyeti. I was not in that committee, of course, but my professor was in there, and I saw some of the meetings, and many people in that time were open-minded. If you say that, okay, we will change, we will make a change in our constitution, people maybe have open-mindedly. But I think that in Turkey, we have three main struggles. First one is ideological between secularist people and conservatives or Islamist people. Second one is sectarian or religious division between Sunnis and Alawis. And third one is ethnic clashes between Turks and Kurds. And I think, of course, these clashes maybe sometimes they make an agreement and they it tries to resolve this problem. This is a good thing. But we have to, I think we generally have to accept that we have these clashes in our society. And these clashes, clash line, generally, not only my opinion, it was supported by Ergün Özbulut, constitutional scholar. And in here, I want to talk about another aspect. I think making a change in constitution is an important thing. But constitution changing period is a kind of war period between different beliefs, different ideas. Why? Because changing a constitution is not an easy thing, and it has a superiority in hierarchy of norms in your legal system. For this reason, some scholars claim that in divided societies, like Hannah Lerner, she claimed that we may use other methods. We may use solve our problem in ordinary legal process or ordinary politics. In Turkey, in fact, we solve our problem, ESCAF problem, in legal aspect, in legal, with laws and in political sphere, in legal and political sphere. And maybe, I think we succeeded it. I am not sure about that. Maybe, thanks to this some legal regulations and changes in society, we may succeed to reach a kind of consensus, and maybe we don't face any kind of problem about ESCAF in the future, maybe. But I don't trust any politicians and any political movements generally in Turkey. There is a strong fight between each other, and their positions may easily change. And I think for today, opposition, secular political parties, secularist and secularist opposition parties, looks like they defend these things. They defend ESCAF. And even Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu talk about we have to make a new kind of changes, legal regulation. But on that time, Erdogan called him to make a constitutional change. But Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu didn't accept it. This is another problem. Why they didn't accept? At least he may start conservation. And shortly, I think Turkey, like countries like Turkey, maybe these legal aspects, legal regulations, ordinary laws, and political sphere maybe solves some of the conflicts, and maybe we succeed this kind of things in the future. But to make it sure, we have to make constitutional changes generally, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. And dear guests, thank you very much. I think we have to close the session because it was a long session. Thank you for your patience. We are very happy to have you here. Inshallah, we can come together again with new discussions and with new sessions all together. Thank you.
We extend our sincere gratitude to all our panelists for their valuable insights and contributions. We also thank Professor Alev Erkilet for her skillful moderation and the depth she brought to the session. So now I would like to invite Mrs. Sümeyye Erdoğan Bayraktar to the stage once again to present the tokens of appreciation to our moderator, Professor Alev Erkilet and Teslim Kırıcı.